All right, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another Mark 6 TDI install video. Today, as you can tell by the title of this video, we're gonna be going ahead and throwing a boost gauge in the Mark 6. I did already have a boost gauge in the vehicle that was an analog gauge. That was good up to 50 PSI. We got this guy right here. This is nothing fancy, it's just a Hewitt Industries boost gauge, analog. Very, very boring looking boost gauge. And the light actually died, the backlight in it, so at night I wasn't able to see how much boost I was making. So I went ahead and I hit up AEM Electronics and they sent me out this bad boy right here. 60 PSI digital boost gauge. This is one of their X series digital gauges that has a whole bunch of crazy features and stuff. It does it has boost control and like a whole bunch of other things that you can hook up into whatever car you install this boost gauge in, as long as you have the AEM controller and everything. So it's not just a boost gauge, it can be a functional emergency cutoff and like that kind of thing for any of your vehicles that have really, really high, very specific boost targets. So it's a really awesome gauge, and we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna show you how to install it in your Mark 6. This will apply pretty much for any vehicle, however you're gonna mount the gauge in your Mark 6. I'm actually going ahead and I'm doing a vent mount style, so this isn't one that's mounted on your steering wheel or anything like that, because it just kind of gives it a little bit of a more clean, out of the way gauge setup, and this is how it was originally set up in my car. So we're just going to be using that, and I will link to the insert for the gauge pod for the vent if you want to do it that way as well. But we're going to start off by doing the gauge install in the vent out of the vehicle, and then I'll show you guys how to wire it all up and everything. But the AEM kit itself comes obviously with the boost gauge, a little bit of boost tap line piping. This is just some rubber stuff, nothing super crazy. Comes with the sensor for the boost gauge itself, and then it also does come with a wiring loom and everything for the boost gauge. So you have your sensor hookup, and then you also have your power, ground, and signal, I believe. I will obviously look through the instructions in a second here on exactly what everything does. And then you also have another boost tap in here along with a T-fitting and a couple of zap straps to run your lines. My vehicle is already set up for a boost tap, so I'm not really gonna run any of the plumbing to do the boost tap. I'll show you guys how my boost tap is set up in my TDI, but I won't actually be going through the process of installing that in this video. This will just be specifically getting the boost gauge in and all wired up and everything, but I will show you how that is all hooked up in my car towards the end. But anyways, we will start with getting the boost gauge set up in the vent, and then we'll get in the car and we'll do some wiring, and I'll show you guys where I ran all my wires and how I did that. So let's jump right into doing this. I'll throw you guys on the tripod. So the boost gauge setup for the Mark 6 is pretty simple, along with how this actually just mounts with the AEM system. It's basically just like a clip style with a couple of thumb screws. Because I actually can't use this bit to mount the gauge in the back, because if you see here, I guess it's kind of dark, the gauge is very, very deep into the vent. So when I put this in, I actually don't have enough depth to get the clip on there to hold it in. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use a method that a lot of other people do. And that's pretty much, we're just gonna kind of put a small amount of tape around the outside of the ring, just to kind of make the fit in the gauge pod a little bit tighter, so it can't just like slip out. So we'll do that in a second, but we're gonna do a little bit of bench wiring really quickly, just because with the vent that we're using, we had to drill a hole just to be able to get the new wiring loom to fit through. So it's just very simple through that hole, and then this is gonna come up, and we can just very simply plug the gauge pod in, and then we will do that little bit of tape around the outside of the gauge. I'm just gonna use like normal electrical tape, just because it's thin. It's kind of anti-slip to begin with, just around the base of the gauge. And now that should essentially make it a little bit of a tighter fit. And there we go. Okay, so the boost gauge is now mounted into the gauge. I might have to kind of just adjust it once I get it in the car, but we'll move over to the car now. We'll do all the wiring and we'll test it out, make sure it all works. Okay, you guys, over here. Because this is a whole kit, I'm gonna use everything supplied in the kit. I'm not gonna do any crazy soldering or whatnot like I do with a lot of my other things, just because a lot of this is already kind of set up and I don't really want to go through the whole debacle of making it all work. So we have our ground is hooked up directly to the chassis of the vehicle. There's actually a good grounding point that attaches the fuse box to the chassis of the car. This grounding bolt doesn't interfere with anything inside the fuse box to begin with, so you're good just to run the ground there. I'm gonna shorten this one because it's a little bit longer for the old boost gauge. And then I have a jumper fuse, or an add-a-fuse, some people call it, that I've just added to, I'm not sure what fuse this is, but it's the 3rd row down and then 5th in next to the 20 amp. So it's just a double stacked 10, and I'm also gonna use that as well from the old boost gauge. So we're just gonna go ahead and quickly wire that in. There are 4 open wires on this kit. You have white and brown. Those are your analog positive and negative, so you don't need those unless you're running it to a boost controller to have this also control your boost, so you don't need that. So all you need for power are the red and black wires, because the other two, or the other lead, goes to the actual sensor itself. So we're gonna go ahead and take that wiring. Add a fuse, crank to that now. Back in. Beauty. Okay, so now we're gonna quickly test the gauge just to make sure it all works. And it's important to note, if you are choosing a location for your add-a-fuse, make sure it's to a switched ignition source and not a constant ignition, or a constant power source. She's already on, which is not good. So either way, we know it's working, so gauge is good to go. So we're gonna get the sensor hooked up now. So we've got our boost tap running to the cabin. We're just gonna screw the new provided sensor in, like that. And now we're just gonna do a little bit of wire tucking. A little cubby right up here. All right, so now we're just gonna check and make sure that everything's all functional in the car. So a couple things I forgot to mention that I said I would, and this is a couple days after the fact of making the video, is my boost tap hookup, or whatever you want to call it, in my engine bay. Obviously 2-liter common rail. I have an ASV delete, or an anti-shutter valve delete, and it has 2 tap inserts on some airlines with quick disconnect. So with these guys, you can push it in and pull it out, and then this runs through all the way through here, and then there's a port in the firewall, like a grommet or whatever, that there's just a hole drilled in, and then the airline goes through. So that's my hookup there, is just right to the ASV delete. If you don't have one of these, you could just tap into an intercooler line or something. Like, my car is all completely custom piping and stuff, so I'm not entirely sure what I would recommend for you guys there. And then we also changed, and I'll show you here in a second. I just gotta open up the fuse panel, but we changed the location of the fuse that we used, because the one that I originally used wasn't correct. So this is the one that we're using now. So it's just number 5 on the top, because that's a switched ignition fuse instead of a constant. So as you can see, the car's not on, keys in my hand, and then as soon as I put the key in, the boost gauge comes on. So that's all that we really changed, and that's all I kind of wanted to cover. So let's go for a drive now. All right, I gotta try and film and drive here. So let's see if this thing is building any boost, or at least reading it properly. That seems to be fairly accurate. It looks so good. So I have the warning values right now set to, I think, 45 psi, because this turbo has been capable of going pretty close to 50 before. I might actually lower the warning threshold even more just because we still are on break-in period. So, but yeah, I mean, it looks sick. Having a digital boost gauge instead of analog is definitely another good modernization addition to the Mark 6, as it is a 10-year-old car now. So, and don't worry about all of the hazard lights on the dash. We're not going to talk about that. But yeah, so that's the AEM gauge install on the Mark 6 TDI. I hope you guys think that that's as sick as I think it is. It's totally dope. I wish I could really do a big sweep and show you guys how high the gauge can read, because this car is capable of quite a lot of boost. For those of you that have followed the channel for a while with the TDI, it is it's a very boost happy car, but I don't want to damage anything in the new motor quite yet, so we'll save that for another day. But anyways, guys, thank you for watching. This has been a quick little video of just doing the gauge install. Peace out. I will see you in the next